Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The moment Damian realized someone wanted him dead, his instincts kicked in not just as a survivor, but as a human. The car explosion that was supposed to end his life had been carefully orchestrated, but what no one knew was that Damian had narrowly escaped moments before the detonation. What the world saw was a fiery grave. What really happened was a calculated vanishing act. With help from an unknown ally, someone from within Victor's old network, Damian slipped away into the shadows, allowing the world, his family, and even Lily, to grieve his supposed death. Hidden behind a veil of grief and mourning, Damian began digging, his mind racing with the only question that mattered: who wanted him dead and why? And as he began retracing his steps, looking back at the suspicious meetings, half-truths, and conversations that didn't sit right, one name kept surfacing with alarming consistency: Cain Ashby. Damian's heart twisted every time he saw Lily crying on TV or overheard whispers about the impact of his death in Genoa City. But revealing himself too soon would only send the real threat underground. Disguised, he infiltrated the world he once walked openly. Through backdoor cameras, bugged phones, and whispered informants in Victor's private security division, Damian slowly began putting the pieces together. What he found, however, wasn't just about an attempt on his life. It was about a conspiracy so dark, so calculated, that it shook him to his core. The first major breakthrough came when Damian, wearing a disguise and working under an alias, hacked into private surveillance footage from the night of the explosion. There, hidden in a grainy feed near the remote cliffside road where his car had blown up, he saw a figure tall, familiar, lurking minutes before the ignition. The camera's timestamp confirmed it. Cain had been there. But why? And how involved was he? Damian needed more than just a blurry image. He needed undeniable proof. And something told him Cain hadn't acted alone. Over the next several weeks, Damian's investigation intensified. He tracked financial transactions connected to shell companies, each one tracing back to questionable offshore accounts that, surprisingly, had Cain's signature buried deep in their digital files. But the most damning piece came from an encrypted drive he recovered from a safe house used by an old contact of Victor's. That drive contained hours of audio-recorded phone calls, meeting transcripts, and, most chillingly, a conversation between Cain and Carter, a name that hadn't surfaced in years. Carter was supposed to be off the grid, a ghost. Yet there he was, plotting with Cain about removing obstacles, referencing Damian by name, and speaking in a tone that made it clear they saw Damian as expendable. Damian listened with cold fury as Carter's voice slithered through the audio. "We give him a hero's death. Clean. Noble. No blood. But we make sure he doesn't rise again." Cain's response was equally chilling. "He's a threat. Too much noise. Too many questions. Lily's attached to him. The longer he stays, the harder it'll be to control her." Damian froze at the mention of Lily. Was she part of this too? Or just a pawn in their game? Every fiber of his being screamed to return home and confront her, but the stakes were too high. He needed to understand the why behind it all. Why would Cain, a man once considered family, want him dead? His search brought him to a remote estate in Montana, one of Carter's known hideouts. Breaking in under the cover of night, Damian uncovered a file labeled Project Eclipse. Inside were dozens of pages of notes, schematics, and plans, all centered around Genoa City, and more specifically, the Newman fortune. Carter and Cain had been working on a long con, positioning themselves to take over not just Newman's subsidiaries but even pieces of Chancellor Winter's. The plan included eliminating Damian, gaining influence over Lily, manipulating Nate through emotional leverage, and subtly discrediting Victor to the board of directors. Every move was strategic, every betrayal, rehearsed. One page in the file had Damian's photo, scribbled with red ink across his face. "Too smart. Too dangerous. Remove before phase 2. Damian's chest tightened, the realization hitting hard. He wasn't just a threat to their business. He was standing in the way of their complete takeover. And now, they believed he was dead, giving him the only advantage that mattered: invisibility. He continued digging and found something even more disturbing. Carter and Cain had orchestrated other events in the past: scandals that had hurt people Damian cared about. It had been them who leaked compromising photos of Nate, them who manipulated Abby into walking away from Devon, and even them who nearly destroyed Billy by planting fake addiction stories in the press. They had been puppeteering for years, always in the background, pulling strings and dodging accountability. But the final straw came when Damian found a hidden camera file labeled Ashby Confession. Clicking play, he watched in horror as Kane, clearly drunk and desperate, paced in a hotel room and began talking aloud to himself. "You think I wanted it this way?" he spat. "I didn't want to kill Damian, but he gave me no choice. He kept digging, kept questioning. He would have exposed everything. And Lily, I couldn't lose her to him again." The video ended with Kane hurling a glass against the wall and collapsing on the bed in tears. Damian had his proof. More than enough. The pain of betrayal tore through him, but the mission wasn't finished. He knew he had to return to Genoa City, but not as the man everyone remembered. He had to make a statement, one that would shake the very ground Kane and Carter walked on. But before returning, Damian reached out to one person he trusted completely, Amy. Meeting her in a safe location under full secrecy, he revealed everything: his survival, his investigation, and the evidence. Her reaction was a mix of shock, tears, and rage. "Lily needs to know," she whispered. "They all do." Together, Damian and Amy planned their return. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, Lily had begun to move on, still haunted by Damian's death but slowly rebuilding her life. Kane had done everything to stay close to her, supportive, present, and careful not to overstep, but his nerves were fraying. Whispers were starting. Nate had become suspicious of his frequent calls with out-of-town associates. Devon had quietly pulled financial records. Even Victor, who had remained strangely silent, seemed to be watching Kane with renewed interest. And then it happened. The lights went out in Chancellor Winters during a board meeting. A security breach. When the emergency generator kicked in, the large screen at the front of the conference room flickered to life, revealing Damian alive, standing in front of a banner that read "The Dead Return with Truth." Gasps echoed across the room as footage began playing. First, the call between Kane and Carter. Then, the confession tape. Finally, the blueprint for their corporate coup. No one could deny it. No one could defend it. Kane sat frozen, pale, his hands trembling. Devon rose to his feet. Nate's jaw was clenched. Lily looked like the air had been knocked from her lungs. He tried to kill Damian," she whispered. "He used me." The boardroom erupted into chaos, but Damian wasn't done. He stepped forward in real time, entering the room flanked by Victor and Amy. His voice was calm, but laced with steel. "You left me for dead, Kane. But I came back stronger. Smarter. And now, you'll answer for everything." Kane stood slowly, his expression torn between rage and desperation. "You were supposed to stay dead. I did what I had to do," he shouted, eyes flickering to Lily. "For us." But Lily stepped back from him, tears brimming. "There is no us, Kane. There never was. You murdered the man I loved, and now you'll face the consequences." Security escorted Kane out as Carter, now exposed, was arrested hours later trying to flee the state. The truth had come out messy, raw, but undeniable. Damian had not only survived, he had won. But as the dust settled, he didn't celebrate. Too much had been lost. Too much trust had been shattered. He stood with Lily on the rooftop of Newman Tower that night, looking out over the city. "You came back," she said softly. "You didn't have to." Damian nodded. "I did. Not just for me, but for you, for all of us." And though the road ahead would be long, Damian knew one thing for certain: he would never again underestimate the darkness people like Kane carried, or the power of truth to burn it all down. In the days following Damian's explosive return to Genoa City, the entire town seemed to shift. What was once whispers in corners turned into full-blown confrontations. The Newman family rallied behind Damian, while the Abbot and Chancellor circles reeled from the bombshell. Kane had not only betrayed the man he once called his friend, he had betrayed an entire legacy. But for Damian, the revelations were still unfolding, and as much as the public exposure had rocked the community, there were deeper layers to uncover. The darkness ran far deeper than he initially imagined. While Carter sat in a federal holding cell refusing to talk and Kane awaited trial, Damian worked with Victor to piece together the remaining gaps. There were names mentioned in Carter's files, people connected to shell companies, silent partners in the attempted corporate takeover. Damian knew Carter and Kane hadn't acted alone. Someone had financed their plans, provided access to confidential human data, and given them protection that stretched far beyond state lines. Damian's instincts told him that this wasn't just about revenge or money, it was about control. With Amy's help, Damian began decoding some of the encrypted files he had taken from Carter's Montana estate. Hidden within layers of digital camouflage was a ledger payments made to a faceless investor listed only as X. These transfers were large, frequent, and routed through anonymous international accounts. But what truly shocked Damian was the signature attached to the earliest deposits, CA, and it wasn't just Kane Ashby. It was Cassandra Ashby, Kane's late mother, presumed to have died in Australia decades ago. Damian's pulse pounded. Could Cassandra be alive? And if so, had she been part of this from the beginning? Victor, upon reviewing the files, grew uncharacteristically quiet. He had encountered Cassandra once in his youth, a fierce and brilliant businesswoman with a cutthroat ambition. If she had faked her death and orchestrated Kane's rise behind the scenes, then this was no longer just a betrayal. This was a generational war. To confirm his suspicions, Damian traveled to Australia under an alias. Using a contact of Victor's in Sydney's underground intelligence scene, he tracked a woman matching Cassandra's age and description to a secluded island off the northern coast. Posing as a tech investor, he chartered a boat and approached the island. What he found there turned his blood cold: an estate, guarded and sprawling, with surveillance towers and high-end security fencing. This was no retreat, it was a command center. Under the cover of night, Damian infiltrated the compound. Slipping into the private library, he discovered file after file on powerful Genoa city figures: Victor, Jill, Lily, Devon, Jack, even Nick and Sharon. Cassandra had dossiers on everyone, tracking their careers, scandals, and vulnerabilities. She had been planning something massive. And on her desk sat a framed photo, Kane and Cassandra, taken just a year ago. She wasn't dead. She had never died. Before Damian could retreat, the doors opened and there she was. Cassandra Ashby. Tall, commanding, her silver hair pulled into a tight chignon. She didn't scream. She didn't call for guards. Instead, she smiled, like she had expected him all along. "You're smarter than your father gave you credit for," she said softly. "Too bad you inherited his self-righteousness." Damian's voice was cold. "You tried to have me killed." "No, Kane tried to have you killed," she replied, pacing slowly. "I merely gave him the tools. The world doesn't reward hesitation, Damian. Kane has always been weak, sentimental. I taught him how to survive. And you got in the way of our evolution." "You see destroying lives as evolution," he spat. "I see it as necessary," she said. "Victor built an empire. But empires fall. We were going to offer a new dynasty, Ashby Global. Lily would have been its crown jewel, had you stayed dead." Damian's fists clenched. "You underestimated all of us. And now you're here," she smirked. "What now? Will you expose me? I've covered every track. The world believes I'm dead. I could vanish again tonight, and you'll be left with just stories." "Except I've already sent the evidence," he said, stepping back. "To Victor. To the FBI. To the press. And they are very interested in dead women laundering millions through corporate ghost accounts." For the first time, Cassandra's face faltered. Before she could react, alarms blared. Helicopters thundered overhead. Victor's private security and international agents had arrived. Cassandra tried to flee, but Damian tackled her to the ground. "It's over," he whispered. She sneered. "This changes nothing." "It changes everything." Back in Genoa City, news of Cassandra's capture sent another shockwave through the community. Victor held a press conference, confirming her survival and years-long conspiracy. Carter was transferred to federal custody, and Kane was officially charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and corporate espionage. He pled guilty to avoid life imprisonment, hoping for a reduced sentence, but the damage to his name and legacy was permanent. Lily, devastated, withdrew from the public eye. Her heartbreak was compounded by guilt. She had trusted Kane, loved him, defended him. Now she saw it all for what it was: manipulation, deceit, and betrayal. Damian, meanwhile, tried to keep his distance, knowing that Lily needed space. But fate, as always, had its own plans. One evening, as the sun set over the Chancellor Mansion garden, Lily appeared at the gate where Damian had been quietly sitting. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, watching him. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't know any of it." "I never thought you did," he said gently. "I defended him," she said, voice trembling. "I fought everyone for him." "Because you're loyal. Because your heart is good," he replied. "That's not a weakness, Lily. That's your strength." She sat beside him, tears sliding silently down her face. "He stole years from us." "We still have time," Damian whispered. They sat in silence for a long while, until Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. A chance to rebuild. To reclaim what Cain and Cassandra tried so ruthlessly to destroy. As weeks passed, Genoa City slowly returned to normal, though the echoes of the revelations lingered. Chancellor Winters underwent a leadership restructure. Victor ensured that Damian was made chairman of one of Newman's subsidiaries, rewarding his courage and intelligence. And Amy, ever loyal, stayed close to Damian, her support unwavering. She had been his lifeline when the world believed him dead, and he never forgot that. But the story didn't end there. One night, Damian received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single photo, grainy, zoomed from a distance. It showed a woman, walking through a prison courtyard. It was Cassandra Ashby. On the back, a note: "The Queen always has one more move." Damian's blood chilled. And just like that, the game began again. Because in Genoa City, no secret stays buried forever. And the dead don't always stay dead. The note had unsettled Damian more than he cared to admit. He had faced down attempted murder, corporate betrayal, and a resurrected villain from Cain's past, but something about that line, "The Queen always has one more move," carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Cassandra had been cornered, captured, and imprisoned under the highest security protocols, but this photo proved one terrifying thing: she was still pulling strings. And if that were true, then Cain, despite being locked away, might not be the end of the story. He might only have been her pawn. Victor met with Damian privately in the Newman Tower penthouse, a place once reserved only for the most sensitive conversations. "She's testing you," Victor warned, his steely eyes fixed on the image Damian had received. "She wants to see if you flinch." "You don't." "I don't intend to," Damian replied, but even as he said it, his thoughts turned to Lily. She had only just begun to stabilize, returning to work, spending more time with the twins, even talking to Nate again. If Cassandra still had allies on the outside, then Lily, and everyone Damian cared about, could still be in danger. He hired private security, quiet but effective, and stationed guards near Lily's home without her knowledge. Amy, sharp and intuitive, monitored Cassandra's known contacts, tracking correspondence and payments linked to shell companies. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became: Cassandra wasn't done. Her network hadn't been dismantled, just weakened. She had sleeper agents still embedded in corporate boards, digital footprints scattered across Europe, Asia, and South America. One of them, Damian realized, was operating out of Genoa City itself. The pattern of encrypted communications revealed an IP address bouncing through multiple nodes but consistently linking back to a property in Genoa City's West End, an abandoned warehouse that had once been part of Chancellor's manufacturing division. Damian and Amy, wearing bulletproof vests beneath their clothes, went in with 2 Newman security operatives just before dawn. What they found confirmed every fear: computers, surveillance screens, and a wall filled with photographs of Damian, Lily, Victor, Nate, even Amy herself. Red yarn connected each picture, notes written in Latin and code beneath each name. It was a war board. And at the center, pinned in gold, was a photo of Cain, with a single word beneath it: resurrect. Amy swallowed hard. She wants him out. Damian stared at the photo in silence. She's planning his escape. Sure enough, just days later, a prison transport carrying Cain to a court hearing was ambushed. 2 guards were injured, and Cain vanished into the night. Alarms rang across the state. The media erupted. Lily, devastated all over again, was rushed into protective custody as Victor coordinated with law enforcement. And Damian? He took it personally. "I'm finishing this," he told Victor. "No more shadows. No more second chances."